Commander Enzo Kale studied the tactical overlay flickering in the holosphere. 312 red icons, Vraxite striker pods, were boiling out of the Maelstrom Nebula. Only 27 blue diamonds, human coalition starships, remained to meet them. And every one of those blue diamonds was scarred. On the flag bridge of HC-03 Bastion, the lighting was racked down to crimson combat tones. Electrical fires snapped inside an opened access panel. Kale could smell the cracked ozone tang of overloaded conduits. If the Varaxites reached missile range before the fleet finished its withdrawal sprint, the 3rd Expeditionary Task Group would be vaporized. "We need 3 more minutes before we can spool the core," Kale said. He touched the comm bead behind his ear. "Engineering, I need those shields. Tactical, keep rotating the Dyke magnetic batteries." A soft chime. "Bridge, Medbay 1, came the voice of Dr. Soraya Mickelson, ship's chief physician. "Permission to deploy Type 4 nanite canisters to outer hull sections, Bravo through Kappa." Kale blinked. She was asking to eject medical supplies into open space? "Doctor, that's negative. We're already lean on the repair drones we do have. I can't risk losing more." "Respectfully, Commander, they're not medical supplies anymore," Mickelson replied, a peculiar excitement in her tone. "They're armor." Kale felt the deck shudder under another kinetic scalp. One more Vraxite kinetic dart, one more 20-centimeter gouge across Bastion's flank. He had no time for riddles. "Explain on the move, Doctor. I'm heading down." He crossed the corridor, boots magnetized to plating that vibrated like a plucked string. Behind him, holographic tactical reports ghosted across bulkheads. HCMS Anvil venting atmosphere, HCMS Marigold losing reactor coolant, destroyer Delphic knocked out of formation entirely. The Vraxites had no interest in territorial conquest or diplomacy. Their sole objective was the eradication of warm-blooded, carbon-based species. 3 wars in 5 years, endless attrition. And now humanity's last professional defense line was folding. Kale vaulted down the central lift shaft, graved down to 30% to conserve power, and strode into medbay. Cots overflowed with wounded crew. Auto sutures sewed across torn flight suits. Analgesic nozzles hissed. In the rear, 30 glittering canisters sat in a curling rack, capillaries of silver fluid pulsing within translucent walls like living mercury. Dr. Soraya Mickelson peeled off surgical gloves and strode toward him. Her gray flight scrubs were flecked with crimson that wasn't hers. "We weren't entirely idle during the last resupply stop at Kepler," she said, pushing a stray braid behind a smeared goggle strap. "I told you my team was working on triage upgrades." "I thought you meant for the wounded," Kale answered. "For the ship," she corrected. "We repurposed our Bion N4 trauma nanites. They can now manipulate carbon-titanium composites as readily as they do epithelial cells." Kale stared at the canisters. "You turned surgical nanobots into welding crews?" "Better than welding crews," Soraya said. "They replicate using trace metals in the hull, weave them into fractal lattice patches 10 times faster than drones. Think of them as scar tissue, except starship grade." Kale exhaled. "And you tested this. When exactly?" "During the minor skirmish 3 days ago. We coated Anvil's dorsal armor. That entire section took 3 direct hits and regenerated every time." Kale recalled Anvil's commander mentioning a miracle fix, but he'd chalked it up to battlefield exaggeration. Now the miracle was sitting in steel canisters, glowing like liquid stars. "How are they controlled?" "A simple pheromone beacon," Soraya said, holding up a fingernail-sized pellet. "One pellet, one swarm. The pellet carries programming for shape requirements, structural density, even external coloration so they match the hull plating." "And if they drift onto an enemy ship," Kale asked, "or into living tissue?" "These things started life as medical bots. We burned out their organic receptor arrays," Soraya replied. "They no longer recognize hemoglobin or protein chains. If they encounter biological matter, they self-destruct. We made sure of it." Another tremor rocked the ship. Lights stuttered. The tactical overlay now projected across the sickbay's far wall. Red icons fanning like a murder of crows around 3 blue diamonds, no longer transmitting. Kale turned away from the blinking casualty monitors. "How long to coat the outer hull?" 4 minutes for Bastion," Soraya said. Smaller destroyers can be treated in 90 seconds if we breach clamp the canisters straight to their wound sites. We don't have 4 minutes. We have maybe 2 before they lock us again. Soraya's eyes held his. Then let's start with the parts getting shot. Kale keyed the fleet-wide channel. This is Commander Kale. All destroyers, prepare for nanoshield protocol. Medical teams, liaise with Dr. Mickelson. We're going to pour the doctor's stims onto the hull and pray they keep us breathing. The channel erupted. Confusion, protest, disbelief. But desperation overrode hesitation. Within seconds, airtight hatches hissed open along Bastion's starboard flank. Robotic arms extended, clasping the first canister outside the hull. Releasing marker beacon, Soraya called. A dull thump vibrated the deck as the pellet fired. On exterior cams, the injection looked like a silver comet tail. Nanites burst into vacuum, instantly coagulating into shimmering particulate haze. They spread across Bastion's wound, a gash 30 meters long, and began knitting hexagonal fibers from stray hull shavings so fast the gash visibly shrank in real time. Where nothing existed, armor blossomed. Sweet cosmos, the sensor officer whispered over comms. Across the task group, identical plumes blossomed along torn destroyers. Marigold's venting spine, Anvil's cratered dorsal, the peeled flank of Overture. Within 90 seconds, the holes disappeared, replaced by fresh plating so polished it reflected starlight like mirrors. Forward coil guns fully functional, weapons reported. Capacitor integrity no longer critical. Kale's heart hammered, not from fear now, but from the sudden, obscene hope rising like a gravity well. They were going to live past 3 minutes. Bring us around, he ordered. Let's give the bugs something tougher to chew. The tactical overlay inverted as the human diamonds flipped orientation, now bearing toward the swarm instead of away. The Vraxite striker pods closed in a convulsing spiral, spitting streams of cobalt slivers, relativistic flechettes that had previously sliced through human warships as easily as through flesh. This time, when the darts impacted, they struck plating only moments old. The nanite patches cracked, spider-webbed, and flowed closed again. Every hit looked as though a puddle of molten steel instantly froze across it. Armor holding at 96%, damage control said, voice incredulous. Return fire, Kale commanded. Ion lance turrets opened like volcanic vents, raking blue-white energy across the incoming pods. Swarms popped as their shielding collapsed. Human gunners, no longer consumed by panic over their own dismemberment, found accuracy they hadn't possessed in days. The first enemy wave broke against the rejuvenated destroyers and dissolved into drifting slag. But numbers still told their merciless tale. For every pod destroyed, 10 more emerged from the nebula. They widened formation, saturating space with flechettes. Armor repairs tried to keep pace, but fractures multiplied, new canisters dwindled. We're running low on nanites, Soraya admitted, breath ragged through the comms. 12 canisters left task-wide. Replication slows whenever raw material thins out. Then we get them more metal, Kale said. Helm, vector us into those debris fields. Give the nanites extra scrap to chew. Bastion heeled, engines flaring a pale aurora. The destroyer dove through a cloud littered with remnants of earlier clashes. Twisted hull plates, empty missile casings, even frozen Vraxite carapaces. Nanites swarmed outward, shredding every fragment into microfilings they could ingest and weave. The hull brightened where it thickened, turning almost white with rapid crystalline growth. On the bridge, Kale leaned toward the navigation slate. Broadcast to all ships. Use the battlefield itself as feedstock. The dead will keep the living moving. Throughout the line, warships plowed through wreckage while bots sucked nourishment out of the graveyard. Armor regenerative cycles shortened again. The swarm of human ships now looked spectral, wreathed in swirling silver halos, part machine, part living organism. The second enemy wave hit. This time, the Vraxite commander adjusted, sending in pods equipped with acid sputters. Jets of molecular dissolvers lanced across Bastion's forward quarter, eating nanite plating faster than bots could rebuild. Hull temperature soared, plating sagged. Secondary port plating at 60% and falling, damage control shouted. Soraya's voice cut in. Divert nanites to degraded sectors. We've coded new instructions. Kale saw it. Silver clouds shifted, migrating across the hull like herds of phosphorescent insects. Where they arrived, the plating darkened into a new composite. Nanites had pivoted, mixing dissolved metal with carbon scoring, producing corrosion-resistant alloy. The acid jets fizzled, their chemicals neutralized on contact. The Vrak sites changed munitions again. Pods swirled together, forming a macro cluster powered by fusion thrusters. It barreled toward Marigold at impossible delta V. At that velocity, they'll ram straight through, Tactical said. Kale's mind raced. Nanites fixed holes. They couldn't stop a direct kinetic insertion too massive to patch mid-impact, unless the hole never fully pierced. Soraya, can you make the bots viscous? Like a fluid? Like blood clotting, Kale said. A self-thickening gel between hull layers to absorb shock. That violates every structural principle. But can you? Silence then. Yes, but we need catalyst heat. Engineering, dump reactor waste through hull vents, portside Marigold. Now. Superheated wash vented into space, bathing Marigold's hull in a halo of atomic fire. Nanites surged into evaporation plume, fused into meta-amorphous paste 3 meters thick. The Vrak site macro cluster smashed in. Sensors flared white. When the glare cleared, Marigold reeled, plating trembling like struck drumhead, but intact. The nanite jelly had distributed the force, congealing into rigid armor the instant pressure spiked. The macro cluster ricocheted off as a molten, misshapen lump. Bridge crews across the task group erupted into cheers. Kale allowed himself a thin smile, then forced focus. Status? Marigold still combat-worthy, plating regenerating, Tactical said. Enemy losses crossing 45%. And ours? 0 since nanoshield deployed. 0. After hours of bleeding, the line had stopped the hemorrhage. But the enemy kept coming. The nebula pulse disgorged new pods, larger, sharper, faster. The Vrak sites were evidently reacting to the impossible resilience of human hulls, committing deeper reserves. At some point, the humans would run out of nanites, scrap, or reactor sludge, and then raw physics would reassert itself. Kale's gaze dropped to a rolling casualty board. Names he feared would still fill far too many lines if the standoff lasted. We need to break their manufacturing spine, Huananasonam, he said. Find me the Queen. Vraxite war pods were autonomous, produced by Queen-forged vessels hidden within the nebula. Destroy the Queens and the pods would starve. But the nebula was a wall of interference, unreadable to normal sensors. Kale turned to Soraya on the secure medical channel. Doctor, your bots process chemical signatures. Could they hunt for Vraxite pheromones? Soraya hesitated. We stripped their biological protocols. Can they be reimplanted? Not fully, she said, but we can piggyback off residual sniffers. If we expose them to Vraxite tissue, they might lock onto queen pheromone gradients. Do we have any Vraxite tissue? Medbay 3, a chitin shard pulled from Lieutenant Ortega's leg. Kale ordered the shard brought to an exterior airlock. Soraya coated a subset of nanites, injecting them with the sample and cueing them to seek matching chemical footprints on a macro scale. Then she vented them, a silver mist curling into black space. Within seconds, telemetry from microcomms piggybacked onto the nanite swarm. A faint directional vector appeared, an infinitesimal gradient of Vraxite pheromone trailing like a ghost wind into the nebula's heart. Helm, align all destroyers on that vector, Kale said. Full burn, wedge formation. We're going queen hunting. The fleet closed ranks, their hulls still glittering with tireless, microscopic workers. Steam plumed where plating recrystallized. They plunged into the maelstrom, sensors blinded, guided only by nanite whispers. Inside the nebula, lurid plasma tendrils licked across hulls. Electrostatic discharge cracked. More striker pods emerged point blank, but the wedge smashed through them, hulls self-repairing faster than the Vraxites could gouge. Finally, the mist thinned. Before them loomed a behemoth, the Queen Forge kilometers wide, fused coral and starship, its organic sac swelling with embryonic pods. It pulsed with malevolent life, exuding pheromonal stench strong enough that bridge air filters registered it inside Bastion. All guns, Kale ordered. No quarter. Ion lances screamed. Missile tubes disgorged tungsten rods wreathed in plasma. The Queen belched defensive shrapnel, but nanite-clotted hulls shrugged off the storm and kept firing. A final lance punched through the forge's swollen midsection. For a heartbeat, light bled from within, painting the nebula crimson, and then the Queen erupted. Radiation washed over the fleet. The shock wave threw ships spinning, but nanite tendrils anchored cracked plating, distributing torque. When the glare dimmed, the forge was nothing but vapor and molten spines. Across tactical maps, red icons blinked, flickered, and died. Pod after pod lost coordination, spiraled out, colliding with each other in disarray. Without biomechanical commands, the swarm became inert metal, drifting in the cosmic wind. On Bastion's bridge, silence settled, broken only by the muted hum of life support fans and half-stunned breathing of individuals who had expected annihilation, not triumph. Comm units burst with cheering from every ship. Kale rested a palm on the holosphere, watching red threats dwindle to zero. He opened the fleet-wide channel. Task Group 3, this is Commander Kale. The enemy is routed. Maintain formation, begin SAR sweeps for survivors and debris reclamation. And someone get Dr. Mickelson a medal before she turns us all into titanium statues. Laughter rolled through the comms. Soraya answered, voice soft with exhaustion. Sir, I still have patients waiting for real surgery, but I'd accept a decent cup of coffee. Bridge will see to it, Kale said. He looked toward the cam feed of Bastion's exterior, where silver clouds still drifted like shoals around a living steel leviathan. Doctor, your nanites saved the fleet. How long until they wind down? They'll continue minor self-replication off ambient matter, she said, but without deliberate feedstock, they'll stabilize and go dormant in 12 hours. We can retrieve them then, reintegrate into medical inventory. Let's not put them back into scalpels just yet, Kale said. We've got more hulls than bones to knit these days. Soraya's chuckle carried a weary melody. Perhaps the line between medicine and engineering was always thinner than we thought. Kale turned to the forward viewport. The nebula storm still raged, but now it looked almost beautiful. Paint swirling after the brush left the canvas. Maybe the line between living and machine, too, he murmured. He thought about the fleet. Vessels once battered to scrap now, whole again, moving as if sintered into a single organism. Scarred, quick healing, collective. Humans had always adapted under pressure. Now, with microscopic helpers born for flesh but pressed into steel, they had reshaped war itself. On his command board, astrogation plotted return vectors toward Coalition space. The journey would be longer than any core spool could compress, and the enemy would evolve again. But for the first time in months, victory felt less like a rumor and more like a plan. Helm, he said, voice steady. Take us home. Engines ignited, silent suns at the sterns of reborn ships. Nanite clouds coiled into streamers, chasing them like phantom banners as the fleet slipped from the nebula, a living, self-healing spear poised for the next fight. And maybe one day, for something better than fighting.